Now we come to the next hat. The next hat is the green hat. You can think of green as vegetation, growth, energy, branches, sprouts. The green hat is the creative hat. When the green hat is in use, everyone is making an effort to be creative. It is not just a matter of one person in the meeting having ideas and everyone being ready to jump on that person and attack those ideas. Everyone is expected to be creative. Be creative or keep quiet. Creative, we're looking for new ideas. We're looking for alternatives. We're looking for possibilities, and provocation and lateral thinking also come under the green hat. Now, a very, very important word on that list is possibilities. Possibilities is the most important word behind Western progress in science and technology. Many people say our progress is due to information and logical deduction. That is total nonsense, total nonsense. Without possibilities, we would have got nowhere. Why is it so important? Because in science, you have evidence. Then someone comes along with a creative possibility, which we call a hypothesis. That allows us to focus attention, collect more information, design experiments, gives us something to work towards. Now, it's true that knowing that our hypothesis is going to be criticized, going to be attacked, we try harder to build up supporting evidence. But the critical destruction of a hypothesis has never produced a better one. A better one is produced by someone coming along with a new possibility and a new possibility. That is the basis of progress in science. In technology, the possibility is the vision. We have this vision, we can imagine something, and then we try and work towards it. So important is a possibility system that we can see what happens to a major culture which never developed the possibility system. China. 2,000 years ago, China was way ahead of the Western technology. They had gunpowder, rockets, bronze, paper, and so on. Had they continued at the same rate, today China would be far ahead of the West. Highly intelligent people, very, very intelligent people who work and study very hard. Didn't happen. Why? Because at this stage, the technicians were trying things out. Let's try this, let's try that, making progress. Then it got into the hands of the scholars. Now, the scholars were very keen to describe everything. Everything was tied up in description packages. The Chinese never developed the concept of the hypothesis. So their progress came to a dead end. Where did the hypothesis come from? Also came from Greek thinking, but the Greek thinking before the Gang of Three, the pre-Socratic thinkers who were much better thinkers. So the possibility system, very, very important part of the green hat system. Creativity, possibility, very important. Then we come to the last of the hats. The last of the hats is the blue hat. You can think of blue as sky and overview. The other hats are looking at the subject, looking at the content of the thinking. The blue hat is looking at the process itself. The blue hat is standing back, looking at the thinking. Just as the conductor of an orchestra is getting the best out of the orchestra by having the instruments play as they're supposed to play, just as the ringmaster of a circus is organizing which events happen, so the blue hat is looking at the thinking itself, the processes of thinking. The blue hat will say, how do we define the situation? With what do we want to end up? The blue hat is concerned with decisions, summaries, outcomes, next step. Very, very key. So what we have there is these 6 hats. Six hats allow us to think in parallel. So at one moment, instead of traditional argument, A and B may both be wearing the white hat. What information do we have here? Then A and B together might be wearing the green hat. What are the alternatives? What are the ideas? What are the possibilities? Then they might be wearing the black hat, the caution. What might go wrong? What do we need to think about? Then the yellow hat, and so on and so on. So although we're thinking cooperatively, you're still going all around the subject to get a full view of that subject. Now, the advantage of the method is that you're using all the intelligence, all the information, all the experience of everyone at any moment. It is not a matter of people dividing into for and against and so on. Now, of course, people always say, yes, well, I'm thinking of anything, I always look at the pros and cons, a balanced view. When you do experiments and you get people to use the hat explicitly, you get huge changes, 300, 400, even 500% changes, big changes, just by asking people explicitly to do what they claim to be doing. Now, the reasons you get these changes is, one of the main things is what I call separation. That when we're normally thinking, we're trying to do everything at the same moment. For example, we might be being cautious, intuitive, creative, all at the same moment. Here we say, no, let's do one thing at a time. Let's have our mind being creative at one moment, intuitive, cautious, all at different times, not all at the same moment. Now, there is some evidence that the way the brain works, the balance of neurotransmitters in the brain, is different when we're thinking creatively from when we're thinking positively, from when we're thinking cautiously. If this is so, then there's an absolute need to separate out the modes of thinking, because you cannot do all the modes of thinking optimally at any one point. It's rather like if you're playing golf and you have your driver, which is good for long shots, and you have your putter, which is good for putting. You can't say to yourself, well, I don't need all those different clubs. I'm going to have this super club, which is just as good for driving as it is for putting. The answer is you won't get one. It will always be suboptimal on anything. Similarly, when you believe that you're thinking optimally, you never are. You're thinking suboptimally in every different mode. And that is one of the reasons we need to separate out the modes of thinking. And that reason is physiological, the balance of neurotransmitters. So that is one of the values, one of the reasons why we need to use something like the six hats process. Another of the values is to do with ego. That one of the biggest problems in thinking is people's ego. That if you don't like an idea, you're not going to try and find anything in its favor. On the other hand, if you are enthusiastic about an idea, you may not be sufficiently cautious. Now, what happens with a hat system is that if you don't like an idea, when the black hat is in use, you are invited to be as critical as you possibly can. But when the yellow hat is now in use, you are being asked to find the benefits and values in that idea. And if you sit there and say, I cannot see any values, but if people around you are finding values, you are now seen to be deficient, defective, inadequate as a thinker. So you shift from being the macho defender of an idea to being seen as a poor thinker. In other words, we shift attention, we shift the balance from ego behavior to your performance as a thinker. And that's very key. And once people start using the system, the framework, their thinking changes, becomes much more constructive, much more positive. We no longer have the argument mode, which really is a sort of a transfer of a fight or a battle into another mode. We have cooperative, constructive thinking. Now, the framework is very, very simple. I mentioned earlier that it's used from top corporations, their senior executive worldwide, IBM, Prudential, Nabisco, Ford, Texas Instruments, Federal Express, NASA, the space agency use it, and so on and so on. Right down to 5-year-olds in school. So it's something which is very simple to teach and very simple to use. There's nothing complex about it.